Hello everyone, I'm Jonas, and today I will be going through my level design workflow from start to finish, and hopefully you'll pick up some ideas of how to improve your own workflow. For the examples for this video, I will be using my Megalopolis map as well as my next map which I'm currently working on, which is called Garden. So what you start out with is the basic idea. What I like doing is going on Google Images and just doing a bunch of different searches for different sort of things. For this one, I have sort of everything with Sky City as well as industrial environments or high-tech city or stuff like that. What I ended up with is, I suppose, something that looks a lot like the Beneath the Steel Sky one in the top middle, as well as the industrial black and white image in the bottom right here. I actually took a bunch of different images, something like 15 or 20, and for every day I start working, I just flip through them really fast, basically to keep my idea consistent from start to finish, because what you might see otherwise is that you get limited by different models or different textures or something, and you basically start shifting your idea while you're doing the map project. So this is just to keep you sort of up to date, and every day you just flip through them. It takes I don't know, 30 seconds, and you basically get the idea back in your head to start working. So for the next step, what I do is I run through and I make a lot of different sketches on a super big canvas. This is just the upper right of the canvas that I was working on here for my it's my next map. So what I do is just go through and sort of paint a bunch of different gameplay concepts, I suppose. They're just super small parts of maps. Like you can see here, it's just a bunch of, these are supposed to be windows, so I just run through and paint a bunch of windows. Like it might be cool to have different angles with windows instead of just the flat one. Or it's a super big balcony here. And here it's just a different way of moving from A to B, where you can get shot at from another level while running on the walkways at the top here. So just run through it and blast a bunch of these super small ideas, because the next step is moving into UDK itself and building the rooms. As you can see here, I've already painted a bit of on these because I actually did a recording just before this one where I forgot to record audio. So there you have it. These are just, I've painted in the top right here, or the top left. It's just like, this is one small sketch. As you can see, this is the one with the sort of windows going like this. Here is another bunch of windows on where the entire wall is leaning. Here is just a sort of a staircase where instead of going through the bottom, you have to go all the way around, which means that if you enter through the bottom door, you will sort of be facing away from the scary part, which is the top left here. So just run through, pick out the best sketches from the last step here and build them in 3D. And then the next step is putting it all together. Whoops, I wasn't. Oh, I was sort of just merged my layers together. But what you can see at the bottom here is I've created a layout just with brushes and a few different models like stairs as well as the big tree models here on the left, because having a sort of a mixed nature theme to the map is my it's just a theme, just like the last one in Megalopolis was Sky City. This one is a mix of industrial and nature. So the white part here is I've drawn on top of the map, and then sort of recommended changes. Like I want the big trees to be in the middle here. You can see the white blobs I painted here. So I want to move the trees into the middle, and then I want to move the sort of staircase area over to the left. And instead of having the sort of extra room at the top here, I will just undo that. I want to have the entire sort of hallway be one way here, one way at the top, and then big pillars in the middle. And I want a bunch of pillars in the right side here as well. And just changing a bunch of things around. Because I find it's much faster to do these sort of changes in 2D, and you can just erase and start painting again if you don't like it. So run through or take a screenshot from UDK, move into Photoshop and draw over it. Do 3 or 4 different versions, pick out the bits you like, turn them into the next version for the map, and keep doing that until you have the layout that you're happy with. So what I ended up here for Megalopolis was something like this. This is just the floor plan, but it still defines the majority of the gameplay. Like the walls are just there to cut down on sight lines and stop you from shooting someone from across the map, basically. And the gameplay revolves mostly around what you're running on and its relation to everything else, height-wise as well as size-wise, I suppose, which is a really silly word. So this is what I start out with. I also pick out a bunch of different models, like you can't see them here. I can switch to unlit. But I took it from my idea, and then I just went through and picked out a bunch of models which are going to make up basically the sort of central look for the map. So it's the green and the grayish green and the gray, as well as these orange sort of detail meshes, I suppose. So I picked out a bunch of meshes. What you should do at this stage, or I'd recommend it, I didn't do it, is go in and change the light map density of the models you're supposed to use, because then you can just go in and clone them and you will keep the light map resolution. So this is a really good place to start optimizing. I didn't do it, but as I can show you in the map list, I can even bring it up now, is going from the 07 part here. Whoops, I have to. It was 66 megabytes, and then when I optimized the light maps, it's just 25, I suppose, instead. And this also cuts down basically the same amount on compiling, so I took off more than half of the compile times by just reducing light map size, basically. Yeah, but the next stage after the floor plan is just adding walls, basically. I should turn on lit to show it. So it's just walls around everything, the same height. The reason why I keep the top open is because I've lit everything with the dominant directional light you can see in the middle here. You can also add a skylight if you want to. It would brighten up certain areas like the part here, which is entirely black. But this is basically how the game is supposed to be played. Adding pickups as well, and you basically have the entire gameplay of the map finished. Everything else is just looks and sort of theme-wise, I suppose. So that is the second stage. For the third one, I've added a theme, which is basically one texture on every wall, and then another one for the floors. As well as in this one, I've added 8 identical models, like all the way around here, just to have a basic skybox, and then I have a fog, which is just for show, I guess. And I still have the same lighting in the middle here. If you add the pickups, this is the place where I would recommend playtesting. and really running through the iterations, because this is the last stage where I use primarily brushes. So after this, things will be harder and harder to change. And since you have most of the gameplay already, this stage is just to add a bit of feeling to the map, I suppose, because you will die a little bit on the inside every time someone comes to test out your maps and they say, oh, it's fun, but it looks like shit. So just adding a super small amount of detail will cut down on those comments, which will make you happier in the long run, I promise. For the next one, I started bringing in the props and just replacing the brush walls with props instead of having just the flat walls. So at this point, I'm not really changing much gameplay-wise. Sure, this part of the wall sticks out a bit more than this part, so you can hide a little bit in the corner here, but it doesn't really matter that much. Adding props like the ones you see over here, which block out part of the gameplay area, as well as providing cover in different directions, is a much bigger change than changing the sort of flatness of the walls. What you can do, if you like, is just adding invisible clip brushes around the models, which would keep the walls essentially as flat as the brush ones, just looking better. So I just go through the entire map and replace brushes with walls or brushes with props. As you can see here, this is basically the extent of how far I've come. There are props here, and then it's just the flat wall. So go through the entire map. None of this is done yet. And for the next one, I have props, which is, like I said, it's just going through and replacing stuff with models, like these ones here, and in this room as well. Like changing the brushes to props here, it doesn't make much of a difference gameplay-wise with the walls, but adding big models like these ones, they actually cut down a fair bit of the playable area. Like instead of being able to hide from the doorway down here, you will have to move to get the health, which is going to be here. You have to move up. Oh, okay, it didn't make much of a change, but it's just pushing you a bit further towards the open area on the left. So it's a small change, but everything adds up eventually. And if I fly up here, you can see I've gone through most of the walls. It's not really finished yet, but I've done a bit of changes. If I show you down here, the props are even bigger, and it makes a bigger change, basically. So after you've gone through and added a bunch of props, what I did was, yeah, I can show you here. Like every light is identical. I've only gone and basically every time I see something like, oh, this is too dark, I just clone the light and move it to where I need it. Something like that. So the next stage is basically replacing the lighting with more thought out lighting. In this case, I'm using essentially just emissive for the wall light 01 model, as well as the blue ones are actually lights placed next to the same models. So I'm using a sort of yellow and blue color scheme here. The last ones were just white, so moving from extremely white or just the grayscale light to something like a touch of yellow and a touch of blue will add a lot of ambience to your map. Just run through it and replace lights with fewer lights that are more impactful, I suppose. And once you have a decent bit of lighting, you should go in, and I've actually added pickups at this stage. As I said before, you should add them at stage 3, where you start your game testing. For this map, it's only intended to be a YouTube video, so I didn't really playtest it. It is playable, but I have only played it with bots. So go in, add some pickups, add some, as you can see here, this is the pickup factory. I've added a light as well as a couple of ammo pickups as well. I've done this for every model. What you can do is just go into the light, pick the light color. Of course, I didn't do it for this one because I missed it apparently, and just take the eyedropper and go to a sort of, I suppose, I don't know what to call the color for that sort of ammo. Like if you're making, yeah, okay, armor, pick yellow because it has yellow on the sides. If you're doing health, pick the green one. If you're doing the shock rifle, pick the sort of purplish pink color. It's a really quick way to add some highlights to where the things will spawn. So after you've done that, the map is essentially playable, but if you run around this and start looking out towards the skybox, you will see that it's super empty in all of these cases. So the next one is what I call world building or skyboxing. It's basically just adding a bunch of different buildings. Apparently I hadn't done it in this version either. I've just started over here, as you can see, with some. You can never get to this one, but it looks exactly the same as the playable area, so it adds a sense of scale. And then once I open the last version I have here, as you can see, I've turned up the contrast a ton using a post-process effect. I've also added a bunch of these sort of out of playable area things that are between the foreground here, which is the playable area, and the extreme background, which is the skybox models. And I've put some things in the midground here. Like there is a building, there's a building, here is a couple of buildings. This one should probably be taller. But yeah, going through it and just skyboxing, placing things in the midground and creating, instead of just having the level itself be sort of a single entity in space, just make the world more believable and create it as it's not just an area meant to be fighting for. In this case, it's an area that actually exists somewhere. And as you can see here, if I show you the light map density, there is a bunch of green everywhere. Like the green is basically confined to areas that the player are going to look while playing, and everything that is sort of skybox or very dark uses super simple light maps. And as I said, this cut down extremely much on compile times. Something like, I used to be at an hour and 5 or 10 minutes, and I cut it down to something like 22 minutes, which is a massive change, and it really adds up. So this is basically what I ended up with after I was done. I think it looks pretty cool. It's my first real map project in UDK. Maybe it's a bit uniform, or everything looks a bit too much like everything else. But yep, this is what I ended up with. What I would also recommend you doing is that when you're working on a map, every single day you should probably compile it at some setting, and then fly through it and take a bunch of screenshots at things you intend to fix the day after. The reason why I do this is because it helps me remember what I should be doing, as well as it lets me start on easy things to fix. Like instead of going to or starting to work on your map and having this huge problem like, oh, I need to change this entire room. Instead, you start your day working on small problems like this stairs isn't aligned, or the light isn't like this one, the light is wrong. Things like that, because then you can blast through 20 small problems in an hour, and then you have the big problem to basically finish up the day. I would really recommend this. It has helped me a lot because starting the day off and actually getting the work in is it's pretty hard. Coming to work and having a big problem and no solution will just postpone the start of your actual work. But if you start with a few easy things, you will just blast off and keep working the entire day. So that is my work process. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you later.